I am A. Kalaivani, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Technology, NGM College, Pollachi. Today we are going to see the topic about server-side Java programming, Java servlet. When the Java programming language is introduced by the Sun Microsystem, it was purposed to embed the greater interactivity into the web pages. Yes, Java has accomplished the task by applets, and applets are added the functionality into the web pages. But because of the compatibility, browser compatibility and bandwidth issues, we are move on to the server-side Java programming like the servlets. Server-side Java programming is the solutions to what the problem has faced by the applets. And Java servlets is one of the most server-side programming technologies to develop the web applications. Literally, we can say the definition for the Java servlet is a generic extension to the Java-enabled server, and it has been used to extend the web server, providing the highly secured, portable and ease of use. And we can embed dynamically loaded the module into the web pages. We can see the definition for Java servlet. Java servlet is a technology used to create the web application. It is an API that provides many of the classes and interfaces, including the documents. And servlet is an interface that must be implemented before we are creating the servlet application to develop the web-related applications. Java servlet is a class that extends the servers and responds to the incoming request. It can respond any type of HTTP request. Servlet is a web component that is deployed on the server to create the dynamic web page. This is a diagram to illustrate how the client and server were connected over the network. When the client has made the request to the server by the HTTP request, the server can generate the response during the runtime, and then server will send back the response to the client through the browser. Next, CGI. CGI means Common Gateway Interface, and CGI is one of the most common solutions to develop the web applications. We see the definition for CGI. CGI is a technology that enables the web server to call an external program and send HTTP request information to the external program to process the request. For each request, it has to start the new process to the servlet. And this is the overall diagram for CGI process, and CGI module is an independent module that is separated from the server. And whenever the server has received the HTTP request from the client, it has to make the CGI connection, that is the new process to the CGI module. So for every request made by the client, the server need to make the new connection to the CGI program. So it has taken long response time to the client. So this is the drawback where we have metered in the CGI technology. Let us see disadvantages of CGI technology. The following are the problems where we have in CGI technology. If the number of clients increases, it takes more time for sending the response. And for each request, it starts the process, and web server is limited to start the new process. It uses only the platform-dependent language like C, C++, and Perl, etc. Next, we will see the advantages of the servlet, why we need to use it as a servlet in our developing web application. So the web container creates the thread for handling the multiple requests to the servlet. That is, the web container has to create multiple threads whenever it receives the request from the client base. Threads have a lot of benefit over the process, such as they have shared the common memory, and it has the lightweight, and cost of the communication between threads are very low. And these are all the servlet architecture. So web server, whenever the web server receives the client request, it has to create the threads. And it can handle the multiple requests through the threads. So by this way, we can develop the threads can communicate with each other as with a low cost. So with a minimum time, it can process the many of the client request. See, this is the process load when we have used servlet technology. See, this is the overall CGI process. In this process, how the processor has loaded while we have using CGI technology. The process is loaded heavily, so the response time will get low. So next we will see the benefit of the servlet. These are all the benefit of the servlets. It has the better performance because it creates the thread for each request, not generated the process. Instead, next, portability, because of it uses the Java language. Next is robust. Servlets are managed by the Java virtual machine, that is JVM. So the developer no need to worry about the memory leakage and the garbage collection. Next is secure. It has more secured language. Why? Because it has used the Java language and also inexpensive one. Next is efficiency. Servlets initialization code is every time is executed only once in the servlet life cycle. After that, the servlet is loaded. Handling new request is only calling the service method. So this is the much more efficient technique than loading the completely new executable code in the servlet technology. Next is extensibility. Servlets are developed in an object-oriented language like Java, so that can be extended and polymorphed into new objects that can better suits as needed. Next is example for servlet. See, this is the e-commerce application is the most common applications where we have used in CGI servlet technology. In an application processing of each request, it has done by different servlet. Example, search a catalog, checkout, confirmation order in an online shopping websites. Cart application, how the servlet can be used in cart application. The servlet catalog gets product data from the database, and cart servlet keep track of the customer purchase, and process servlet process the order. And for order process application, process the order, customer order, processes payments and send acknowledgement to the client. So these are all the way where we have used in our application with the servlet technology. Next, Java Servlet API. As already said, API is an interface. It has several interfaces and classes with the documents. So Java X.Servlet package can be extended for use with any application like layer protocol. HTTP is most popularly used protocol for sending request and receiving the response from the servlet as well as from the server. Java X.Servlet.HTTP package is an extension of Java X.Servlet for HTTP protocol. Next, the servlet specification allows to implement the separate Java methods like doGet, doPost, doPut, doDelete, doOptions and doTrace. Next, we should know what is HTTP protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is a lightweight protocol for the web involving a single request and response for an communication. It has provided 8 methods. Get method. Get method is used to request the data from the server, and post method used to post the user request to the server. Next is head method. Head method returns the HTTP headers for a secure. Next is put method. Put method is used to upload or like a source to be, file to be uploaded in the web server through the URL. Next, delete method. Delete method can be used to delete the source or a file. Next, connect method. It has to be used for make the connection between the client and the server. Next, options. To determine the type of the request server, it will handling the in a better way. Trace. Next is trace is used for debugging. Next, anatomy of the servlet. This is the framework of a servlet where we have used in a servlet technology. These are all the main 3 methods whenever we need to create the servlet application. So init method, destroy method, service method. In service method, mainly we have used 2 more methods. One is doGet method and another one is doPost method. Servlet API lifecycle methods. These 3 methods were involved in servlet lifecycle. So init method should be called when the servlet code is initiated, and it should be returned before any other methods will be called. Then service method. This method called directly by the server when the HTTP request is received. So service method calls do get or do post method. Next, destroy. It has to destroy the memory or the file to shut down the server. Next is the servlet lifecycle, how the request and response has to be made through the servlet. First, the HTTP request. HTTP request 1 can be in a servlet lifestyle. We should call the init method to initiate the servlet to basically to establish the connection between the server and the servlet. Next, the client has requested the request HTTP request for calling the call service method, and then call service method has performing the services, and the response has to be sent back to the HTTP response 1. Again, the client has sent the HTTP request 2 to the servlet, and then call service method has to be invoked to perform the service, and then HTTP request 2 has to be get back to the client. And finally, it has called the call destroy method or the call destroy method to end up the service. Next is server-side programming. So web server response can be static or dynamic. Static. So the HTML document is retrieved from the file and returned to the client. Whenever we need to retrieve the document as it is from the database is called a static way. Then dynamic, it is to be generated by a program in the response through the HTTP request. Then servlet is a class initiated by the server to produce the dynamic response. Next is servlet overview. How the data can be read from the client. We will see it. When servlet starts it initiate servlet. Server receives the HTTP request, determine need for the dynamic response. Server selects the appropriate servlet to generate the response, create request or response object and passes them to the method on the servlet. Servlet adds information to the response object via the calls, and then server generates the HTTP response based on the information stored in the response object. The browser uses two methods to pass the information to the web server. One is get method and another one is post method. So we will see the first get method. The get method sends the encoded used information through the format of this HTTP and the information is appended with the question mark symbol. This is an example for get method we have used to send the client, to send the servlet. Next is post method. Generally, more reliable method of passing information to the backend is a post method. This packages the information in exactly the same way as the get method, but instead of sending the text, it has used the question mark in the URL as to separate the messages. This message comes to the backend program in form of the standard input. Next, servlet handles this type of request using the do post method. Next. Servlet handles different type of methods to the process. So get parameter values, get parameter names. So get parameter you call request.get parameter method to get the value of the form parameter. And get parameter values call this method if the parameter appears more than once and return multiple values, for example checkbox. Get parameter names, we just call this method if you want to get the list of parameters in the current request. See, this is an example when we have to develop the servlet application. First, we need to create the class. That class is extends from the HTTP servlet. Here we have created the class name servlet hello. Here we used do get method in the class, main class. So here HTTP servlet request object we have passed two more parameters. One is request parameter and response, HTTP request parameter and response parameter. In that we have two objects. Request object is under the class HTTP servlet request and response object is under the class HTTP servlet response. Now we have print writer method, response dot set content type, text or HTML, character set is equal to UTF-8. Next print writer, servlet out is equal to response dot get writer. this is the sample of a program for a servlet technology. Thank you.